Hey guys, Thread and Still Gaming here with yet another video. On today's video, we're going to be talking about the boss fights in the side missions. I want to give you my thoughts on what each of these, what I liked, what I didn't like about these fights. We're completely done with the main story. There are no spoilers here, so if you haven't completed the story yet, these are just talking about the boss fights in the side missions. But before I get to that, if you like what we do here, please make sure you share, like, and subscribe. We are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers so we can get the YouTube partnership, and I do appreciate everyone coming in and hanging out with our content that we've been doing for the live streams. You can go check out our full playthrough over on the playlist in Gotham Nights. Other than that, let's get to it. All right, first up, we have Harley Quinn's fight. Now, I thought this was pretty good. Now, this is one of the three, this is the most grounded, obviously, because she doesn't have any superpowers. She's just a psycho chick. And I thought the mechanics that they had in this was pretty good. She has a sledgehammer, and she wheels it around. Her moves and the way her counters towards you were pretty good. There's elements around the board that shock you. She drops these bombs on the ground that keep you engaged into what it is. You're trying to stay away from them as she's swinging the sledgehammer around. She has some really cool counter moves. I thought the mechanics of each round. Now, obviously, if you're playing this at a higher level and you're built to the nines, then you could destroy her in a couple seconds. But at level, I'm playing on a medium difficulty. I thought this was pretty good as far as the amount of time it takes to do a boss battle. I feel like should be a boss battle. I feel like it was an actual well-rounded fight overall. I think the time that you played and the increments of having the mechanics, right? You could see that she's doing a lot of damage. Not a lot of damage, but she's doing some damage to me, stunning me. I like the movesets that she had, how she threw you up against the wall and whatnot. So overall, I thought this was a really good fight. There's also the different stages. So when you get her down a little bit, then the ads come in and they give another little different feel to the actual fight. So now not only are you trying to dodge her and the abilities that she's doing or the other side effects that she's doing, but now you're trying to get away from the ads. And the ads are there, of course, to drop health and whatnot during the fight. I thought Harley Quinn's fight was quite done well. It's probably one of my better fights that I liked in the game, but we'll see. Overall, like I said, I really like this fight, and yeah, I hope they give us more characters like this with the boss mechanics and whatnot. Overall, good fight. Next up, we have Mr. Freeze. Now, Mr. Freeze's fight, we saw this 2 years ago when we saw them do the alpha test or the alpha footage that they showed us. This fight overall, again, I did this by myself as well on medium difficulty. This was the later fight that I had. I had Clayface before this one, but I bring this fight up before the other Mr. Freeze fight that we have later on in the case files. I thought this was actually pretty good. I thought the mechanics of him, when he first starts off, it's just you versus him, and then all of a sudden, he's got the freeze gun that he blasts at you. Then he has this array of like this area of effect that he hits, and it goes up in the air, which could hurt you if you're in that area. Then he also has where he drops a little bombs, he swings at you. I like this fight as well. This is a good fight solo in the beginning. Okay, he has this barrage that he drops, like these mortars that ice mortars that he drops on you. He freezes the ground, he flies up in the air. This is a good boss mechanic when you're fighting by yourself. Then there's this second stage that he does where he leaps up onto the device in the center once you get him down to a certain point, and then it becomes a second tier where you can't do any damage to him, and you have to run for your life, and the lasers shoot out, and they break the barriers around you. Now, I thought this was interesting because I didn't know the barriers were going to get broken, and they were completely gone, and at this moment, I was like, okay, well, does he make new barriers? And there's this barrage that comes down, there's air raid that comes down, and I thought for sure that the ice would form other barriers on the ground to block you. Instead, it's just like a mortar effect, and I thought this was interesting and cool, but at the same time, I was like, oh, then the lasers started shooting, and I was like, oh, you got to stay in between them, and they move pretty fast, and they move up and down, left and right, and they also do counterclockwise as well. So I thought this was also another good technique. He jumps off, you start fighting him again, And again, overall, I think the devs did a good job with this fight solo and also on medium difficulty. This may vary on hard difficulty. It might be too spongy. And then also if you play with 2 people, you'll probably just run through this as super fast. Now, I don't know if these boss fights were balanced with co-op in mind or if it was solo. Some of the boss fights feel a little counterproductive as far as one's solo, one's co-op, and I'll get to that in a second. So I thought this Mr. Freeze first fight was actually pretty good. There's another stage when he jumps up that the ice, now he just does the red lasers. These red lasers start shooting out and they start going haywire. And I thought this was actually, again, a pretty good mechanic for the Mr. Freeze fight. Now, I'm not judging this on like, oh, what could they do? I'm just giving you information based on what the fight is. I really would like to see more fights like this in future DLC. Now, going forward, I've always talked about in a comic book game, you want to have as many heroes as possible, and you want to have as many villains as possible to fight up against. And I know it's hard to make the mechanics for these bosses, but I think this one's actually a pretty good, again, solo, doesn't take too long to beat the fight. And then once you're maxed out, you could probably destroy him in 2 seconds. Again, that might be a balancing issue based on the power the power that you're doing compared to the level cap that you can get at, if that makes sense. So overall, I think Mr. Freeze's fight is a good, the first fight anyway, is a good boss fight overall. Okay, the third fight is against Clayface. Now, Clayface I thought was really cool as far as you can see the different stages. And the reason I did him before I did Mr. Freeze, but the reason I did this in the edit was because of you can see the different designs as they went across, right? There's a couple different fights that you do with Clayface. There's the one where he's small, then there's the one where he's big like this, and then there's another one where there's a chase scene and whatnot. There's three different types of stages with Clayface. And if you look at Harley Quinn is just the grounded, like, regular person, then you look at Mr. Freeze, who's a person, but then, you know, transformed, where he's sort of got superpowers, or he's, you know, high-tech stuff. And then you have Clayface, which is just a straight-up mystical monster, basically, right? So I really like the different aspects of the villains in this game. Now, Clayface itself, I thought was pretty good for this particular version of the fight. He's got the little hand sweep that he comes and gets you. He's not very mobile, very slow moving, but when he goes and reaches for you, he moves quite fast. He's got little things. I think they could have done a little bit more with this because it's a little slow and methodical the way he swipes. Very simplistic, very easy. Now, the level that I'm at here, again, playing on medium difficulty, was, you know, doing enough damage. I didn't feel like this particular fight was too long or too short. I felt like it was a good balance for this fight of Clayface. Overall, I think this is the least favorite of the fights. I do like, though, that Clayface that you're fighting him at here, he vanishes in the ground, he comes out of the ground. There could have been a little bit more, maybe like a little bit of AI, or I'm sorry, ads. Maybe he shoots out some clay monsters, men, and they also help you to give it more chaotic, because this is just a little too slow of what's happening here. He could have thrown some boulders or some clay at you, something along those lines. But overall, I thought this was pretty good, a pretty good fight as well. Probably my least favorite of the 3 side missions of this particular fight of Clayface. Now, there's a little chase scene that happens between the last Clayface fight and this Clayface fight. This Clayface fight, I think, is better technique-wise as far as what he's doing. And now, different stages, different things. Here, he throws something at you, okay, from his chest. He also slams the ground, which does an area of effect, and I thought was pretty good. And then he also sits there long enough for you to do damage. He punches the ground, slams the ground, kind of moves around a little bit faster than he did earlier. He does a couple of things where he puts his hands in the ground and clay starts shooting out of the ground as well. So I thought this mechanic was pretty good. Now, the difference between this fight and the last fight was he feels a little bit more spongy over here, and maybe it was because the way I was leveled up at this time. I don't remember the actual level I was at. Again, I did this a little later in the game. I would say I was around level 26, maybe. I thought I wasn't doing enough damage. Again, this is just based on my build that I had at this time when I decided to do this. It felt very elongated in this fight. Like it could have been faster. Now, some of these fights, like I said earlier, could have been balanced more for co-op, which would make sense, right? So I played this later on with a buddy of mine in his game, and we completely destroyed him way too fast in co-op based on where our levels were. Now, I don't know if there was a glitch or a bug, but I felt like some of the battles that I had, like the Mr. Freeze fights, I felt overpowered. And then in the Clayface fight, which I did after Mr. Freeze's first fight, I felt underpowered. So it was, I don't know if there was a discrepancy in the actual like leveling process. It wasn't detecting like what I was compared to what it was supposed to be, because it wasn't scaled to my level, if that makes sense. But this felt a little too long, and I feel like the balance, a lot of these boss fights are, some of them, like I said earlier, are balanced to single player, and some of them are balanced for co-op. This is one of those fights that co-op, I think, was more intended here. Overall, I think the Clayface fight, both stages, was a pretty good fight, but I think the balance of what was happening here was a little off. But again, I really do like all of these fights. Okay, the last fight in the side missions is the second Mr. Freeze fight. I thought this one was probably the best. Now, I know I said the Harley Quinn one was kind of like my favorite because it was grounded, but I feel like this is like video game boss. Like when you go up against the boss, this is the boss that you're talking about, right? I want to see more like this in this game. Like going forward, any kind of future content, like over the top type of mechanic where if you're fighting two-player co-op, if you're fighting one player, or if you're fighting four-player co-op, I don't know how the heroic assault's going to be, but this fight right here is exactly what I want to see. Larger boss, moves pretty good. He's got a bunch of different things that he does. He's got the laser on him. He's got the mech itself that does damage. I like the mechanic that it does. So it's got a little bit of mortars that drop down. You're doing damage to the actual legs, which then stuns him in a certain way, where there's a mechanic. You see that the legs are turning red as you kick them, you know, and they break, and then he heals. He's got the laser where he spins, and you have to try to dodge him the entire time. As you're trying to not get injured, you're doing more damage to the actual legs. I like that he does the area of effect as he's trying to hit you with those legs. Then he rails up, and there's the legs underneath that you're supposed to hit, which I didn't, but it gives you a nice little moment to hit him. Then he slams the ground, gives like a little ice wall effect. Like this whole fight, to me, is like what boss fights should be in a video game. I thought overall, again, he's got the mortars that he has, the barrage of that, freezes the ground, he's hitting you constantly. He's fast moving, but not super fast moving. He also has this thing where all of a sudden he decides, okay, you've done enough damage to me. I am now going to bombard the entire area, and you can't stay on the ground. You're like, what do I do? And you have to grapple hook up to the top. And little things like this, again, I think the well-rounded boss fight, right? He goes up to the top, and it's like, you got to get out of there. He's going to freeze the ground. He's shooting you with a laser. You got to dodge it, okay? And then he's going to bombard you with a whole area of effect that you can't stay on the ground at all. I don't know. I like this mechanic. He does the bombardment. He does the hits. He does the area of effect. What I also like about this fight is it moves. You're fighting in one area, and then all of a sudden he decides that he's going to jump out of the arena and create a completely different arena. And I thought the cutscene here was pretty good. He freezes the whole lake, and then all of a sudden, now you're fighting on top of this ice bucket or this ice flotation thing. You know what I mean? Like he freezes the whole area of the water. And I thought this was a pretty neat thing. It was like sort of like an evolution of the next stage. And I really thought that this encapsulated like the entire what a boss fight should be in a superhero game. Okay, at this point, now you are fighting him in yet a new arena. he does all the same type of mechanics, and then they add a couple of more, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, here's that area of effect that he does, right? He does this huge blast. The whole ground is covered. I didn't know what to do. It says grapple away. I was trying to grapple away, and I failed miserably. So you get frozen, then he can start doing damage to you. Overall, this whole boss fight encapsulates what a boss fight should be. I know I've said this multiple times, and I'll say it again. This right here is my favorite boss fight. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Out of just the side missions, which one was your favorite boss fight that you had? And tell me why it was your favorite boss fight. Also, let me know what you guys think they could do in the future as far as boss fights go. Would you like to fight Clayface again, but Clayface has a couple of different little animations or different types of stuff that they go back and make a different boss fight? I really like what potentially this game can go with the different villains that they could add and the different boss fight mechanics they can do. I think they did a really good job with these case files. I know there's very few of them, but I think there's a array of different styles of boss fights here, and they're all not going to be like this Mr. Freeze battle. Like, there's those simplistic ones like the Harley Quinn, and then there's the mundane kind of ones like Clayface, but they're interesting, and then there's Mr. Freeze. Now, both Mr. Freeze fights, to me, were done really well mechanically wise, what you can do with machines and whatnot. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Appreciate you guys watching this. Please make sure you share, like, and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.